Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Looks like we're back to normal, getting back to normal. Another week, another white guy with a gun goes on a shooting spree. I think we're getting back to normal. First, you had the incel with the guy that was having a bad day, shooting up a few massage parlors. Now another, what I'm guessing, another incel type, without a shirt, shoots up a grocery store in Boulder, Colorado. This is welcome back to a normal America. And understand, Congress will do nothing. There'll be nothing done because we'll just throw up our hands. Well, what could we do? Hope, I guess, offer hope, thoughts and prayers. I guess that's where we are. And welcome back. And again, this is another one of those horrible moments where the news media is all over it. And I've always said that I've never said their names. It is my policy never to utter their names. They were just horrible people who did horrible things, and they shall not get any notoriety from me. But our thoughts, our prayers, our hopes go to the families and the victims, and to our policymakers. Something. Got to do something. Sad stuff. On the virus front, looks like we might be heading somewhat toward the right direction, getting shots in arms. Exceeded 100 million in 58 days, on the right track. Not out of the woods yet. And I think a lot of experts are saying, hey, if we could just hold on just a little bit longer. If we just hold on. No more idiotic mask burnings. No more crazy, stupid nonsense COVID parties to see who can get infected. How about we not do anything just yet? Because as the CDC director has said, her name, Rochelle Walensky, let's not have an avoidable outbreak. Let's not have an avoidable surge. How about we just hang on a little bit longer? And this is one of those weird things for me because, I've been saying for a while, we're almost there. Almost there. Calm down a little bit. Stay away from each other. Wash your hands. Don't breathe on each other. Take a break. I know summer's coming. And this is one of those moments with the vaccine. More people, I'm knowing more people every day who are going, hey, I'm getting my first shot, or hey, I got my appointment. Great. Let's get to there. We've gone all this way. It's right there. And the fear is that this mutates, that there's these variants that, we end up making it stronger or different, that the vaccine isn't as effective. Now they're saying that it's fairly effective. We might be okay, but don't do anything stupid. Because here's the thing, I live in a fairly rural area, and rural areas around this country have just been decimated by the fact that you have very limited healthcare resources to begin with. And then you heap on all of this expense. You heap on all of this massive use of what resources you have. And it's been harming the local hospitals, especially when people don't have the ability to pay. Because we have a lot of people in rural areas, just like in urban areas, that don't have health insurance. We have fallen down on ensuring that people that have conditions. People get sick, get the care that they need with the insurance that they need. I just read a story the other day that, evidently, multiple hospitals across the country have been closing, and a lot of them in rural communities. The people who can afford it the least. So this is one of those weird moments where you just go, the communities that can the least afford to be harmed, poor, rural, working class areas, are the ones who are being hit by this. And also, sadly, they're the ones going, it's all a hoax. It's all nonsense, until they get it. And then it's, everybody come to the rescue. But what do you do when there's nothing left? Which is why I think what Biden has done with this American Rescue Plan is a great thing. I think it's going to help shore up some of that need that we have all across the country. And I've been spending a lot of time listening to the right wing whine and complain about it. And I keep coming back to I don't know what it is that they're expecting. Because they don't have any alternatives. What Romney and the gang of whatever 10, I guess, what they came to the White House with was barely a dent in the need that we have. And it wasn't, I would argue, even a serious proposal. It was that kind of thing that employers do when they want to make it look like they're bargaining in good faith, but they're not. Because they know what they're offering, nobody in their right mind would ever take. And that's what Romney and company did. And good on Joe Biden for saying, you know what, we're going to move forward on this. Because urban areas need it, and rural areas need it a lot too. And as I was saying up until the run-up, it wasn't just those blue states. It wasn't just a blue state bailout. This was a national hand up. This was a national help bill. This was a national rescue plan. And I'm happy that it went through. Now, obviously going to be more whining, more complaining. But we're in this weird kind of moment where the Republicans have no plan. So all we end up getting is a bunch of nonsense, a bunch of division, a bunch of, hey, look at this shiny thing over here, a bunch of distraction. And one of the big distractors, I look at Lauren Boebert, the congresswoman from Colorado, who is sadly way out of her depth. She over the weekend took to mocking a hashtag that was mocking her. Because over the weekend, people tweeted under the hashtag, Lauren Boebert is so dumb. And you've heard that, how dumb is she? Well, she's so dumb, it takes her 2 hours to watch 60 Minutes, stuff like that. Mine was very clear. She's so dumb that she claims the U.S. Constitution should never be changed under any circumstances, none whatsoever. It's impossible. It can never be done. It's written in stone, like the 10 Commandments that Moses brought down. Never can be changed ever. Yet she signed on to an amendment to the Constitution to change the very Constitution that is in stone in her view. That is the epitome of dumb. But she tweeted out this week, seeing Lauren Boebert is so dumb trend at number 1 just proves what I've been saying all week. The left hates women. What? No, the left doesn't hate women, and we don't even hate you. I want you in Congress. I want you to have a long career because you are the epitome of what the Republican Party has become. We want you there. As my son always says, it's not that you're worthless. It's that you serve as a bad example. But she claims that she's the top target of the left. And I argue she's not. She is, for me, the bad example. This is what you don't want. Someone who has no idea of what they're doing, doesn't know the basic anything about our Constitution or our system of government, and yet she's out there saying, "Hey, give me money." Because of course this tweet was a, "Hey, give me money because I'm the top target of the left." No, I say leave her right there. I wouldn't spend a dime in her district. I want her the albatross around the Republican Party's neck. Let them have to deal with her. And I hope Marjorie Taylor Greene wins again too. Because I think both of them are indicative of what's wrong with our political system. Where you reward destroyers, you reward the people who are the loudest and the most obnoxious and the ones who get, well, the popularity contests. Instead of people who actually know what they're doing and actually have a plan. This is my problem with what's going on with our government. And this is why I'm glad to see Joe Biden doing the work, doing yeoman's work, getting out there, doing the job, getting that $1.9 trillion plan pushed through. And now there's talk of a $3 trillion new spending plan. As I've been saying, we need a giant infrastructure bill. We need something that's going to boost our economy. We need something that's going to put people back to work. We need something that's going to bring us into the 21st century. And as it's being, now what we understand is there's nothing in writing. These are concept proposals. There's talk of it's going to be done in two parts. The Build Back Better jobs and infrastructure part of it. That's going to be your traditional physical structures, your roads, your bridges, your ports, your airports, you name it. All of our stuff that's been neglected for the last 30 years, 40. All of those things that our grandparents' generation built that are now crumbling, that needs to be done. And we need to be making the investments into the future. Universal broadband access, 5G technology, all of the things of the future that our country needs, they're going to be going after. And in a big way. And it's something we've needed for a long time. One of the things, oddly enough, I agreed with Donald J. Trump on. The former guy, who, if you remember, ran on, $2 trillion in spending 5 years ago. Nothing got done during his term. Lots of rhetoric, lots of fun photo ops, lots of infrastructure week parties, but no actual work. And this is why I'm hoping that Biden keeps his nose to the grindstone and gets moving right on through. And I'm hoping in this infrastructure part of it that's going to focus on manufacturing and building back our capacity, thus the name Build Back Better. That he puts in with that the PRO Act that gives workers the ability to organize, to fight for better wages, hours, conditions, and to be able to get some bit of dignity on the job that comes with a good living wage, comes with good retirement security, good health security, and safe working conditions. I think that is a great thing, and it's going to help. It's going to help, I would argue, rural communities even more than urban communities. Because in this day and age, if you're not anywhere near decent broadband access, you're left out. And I think this pandemic has shown, just how bad some communities have got it. Because we don't have decent internet around this country. And if you didn't, you have fallen behind in all of this. Now, the other part of the bill, I guess, is going to be some of the social stuff. We need infrastructure for K through pre-K programs, for free community college, child tax credits, healthcare subsidies, that kind of stuff. That's going to be, I think, the harder lift, which is why I think they've split it into two bills to take some of the controversial stuff out of what everybody agrees on. Everybody agrees we want roads that will not destroy our car. Everyone agrees that we want to, when we drive over a bridge, we want to get to the other side without collapsing into the drink. I think we all agree. I mean, there might be one guy out there who's going, no, I think I'd like to see that. And I guess if you're not on the bridge, that's where the option is. But if you're going across the bridge, you want to get to the other side. If you are flying in an airplane, you want to have somewhere to land. Seems reasonable. Seems rational. Seems like something we should be doing. Question is, will we get it done? Now they got a shot to go through budget reconciliation here. They can probably push this through. Is $3 trillion enough? Well, according to the American Society for Civil Engineers, it's not going to get us to the top, but it's going to get us a good way there. It's going to get us, maybe not on the honors roll, but we're gonna do well. And it's what we need. If we're going to be competitive around the globe, if we're going to create manufacturing, if we're going to create jobs, we have to have that infrastructure. And this isn't rocket science. It's not new. It's not something that we just dreamt up. This is something we've been talking about since, the W. Bush years. I remember infrastructure coming, and even during the Clinton years, to be honest. I remember infrastructure being something that we said, oh, hey, we should be doing that more. And then it got a little bit more difficult under Clinton, a little bit more difficult under W. Bush, damn near impossible under Obama, thanks to Mitch McConnell. Trump didn't even bother trying. And now you've got this moment where Joe Biden's going to say, this is what we need. And you know what? It should be nonpartisan. But yet I've seen some whispers so far. And now this is obviously new, just breaking, that, the number. I'm hearing a lot on the right, whispering that, this is just going to be, it's going to be handouts to those workers and to the blue states. And I go back to this, the areas that are going to benefit the most are rural communities, the ones who are so farther behind. And I can't wait. I can't wait for them to bring actual decent broadband access into rural communities, because I need it. I can't wait for them to invest in 21st century technology and bring us kicking and screaming into the new world. I think it's a good idea. I think it's helpful. I think it's something we should, without question, be doing. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Is it too much? Can't do it. Or is it not enough? I've had some people say not enough. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, former Illinois Congressman Joe Walsh is going to be here to share some thoughts on immigration, spending, infrastructure, and much more. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1972. That was the day the Equal Rights Amendment passed the U.S. Senate and moved to the states for ratification. It had passed the House the previous fall. Alice Paul and Crystal Eastman of the National Women's Party first wrote the ERA in the 1920s. It was introduced to Congress in 1923. The revised version that Congress passed in 1971 and 1972 stated simply, equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of sex. The amendment needed 38 states to ratify by March of 1979 in order to pass. 35 states ratified the amendment, but 5 states later rescinded ratification. The 38-state requirement was never met. The decades-long debate among women's rights advocates often centered on formal equality versus protective legislation for women workers. But an amendment establishing equality meant the end to restrictive discriminatory laws. These included laws imposing restriction on a woman's right to buy or sell property or to conduct a business, the age at which women could marry, differing admission standards for boys and girls in tax-supported educational institutions, laws establishing different jail sentences by sex for identical crimes, regulations denying unemployment compensation payments to pregnant women who are still able and willing to work, and much more. The far right and religious fundamentalists of all faiths fiercely opposed the ERA, fearing it would erode traditional gender roles. Many progressives and the labor movement also opposed it for many years on the basis that hard-won protective legislation would be lost. It is striking that, as of 2017, there is still no clear legal codification of women's equal status to men.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So reports, again, multiple fatalities, one of them a Boulder police officer. And look, I said it's just back to normal, another week, another white guy with a gun. We'll find out what triggered this, but it just seems like this is what happens. And here to share some thoughts, I'm sure we're going to disagree on this one. I've asked my good friend Joe Walsh to come back and talk with us. Joe's former Illinois congressman, current radio host, and nicer guy, to be honest. Joe, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, I always like being with you, Rick.
So give me the gun thing. What are your thoughts on what happened today?
No, there is no gun thing. There's no nothing because we don't know what happened.
Yeah,
I mean, Rick, all we know is there are multiple victims, including a Boulder police officer. What we all tend to do when stuff like this happens is we go to our political corners and we start firing our political shots before we know the who, what, when, where, why.
All I know, Joe, is a white guy with a gun shot a bunch of people in a supermarket. That's all I know at this point. That's all I've said I know.
Well, but even that, Rick, we don't know for certain. You and I saw video of some bare-chested white guy, handcuffed out of the store. We don't know. That's all I'm saying.
All right. I love
all the victims.
I love the assumption that maybe he could be innocent because bare-chested white guy being led away bleeding. Maybe he could be.
No.
innocent.
We don't even know. And that the press conference just a little bit ago by the police was terribly uninformative.
I agree.
We don't even know who the suspect is. That's all I'm saying.
All right. And that's a good place. I want to get some of your thoughts on the crisis on the border. I'm sure you've seen the headlines as everybody else has. The voters agree border crisis and they blame Biden. New Rasmussen report out says 67% of people say there's a crisis and it's 53% it's Biden's fault. AFP reported Republicans smell blood as Biden battles immigration crisis. CNN freaking N, how the border problem caught Biden team off guard. And my favorite, breaking, the Biden border crisis revealed in new photos. He said 60 days into this is a problem that's been decades in the making. Is this a crisis?
Well, I'd answer it like this, Rick. Yeah, it's a crisis. Anytime you have almost 1,000 unaccompanied minors coming into the country every day, that's a crisis. Trump had the same crisis. Obama had the same crisis. George W. Bush had the worst migrant crisis. So it is a crisis that continues to reappear because our entire immigration system is broken.
We absolutely agree on that. And I blame Congress for it. I blame people like you who served in Congress who couldn't get something done. And the last time we tried was during the George W. Bush years, and we could get nothing accomplished.
Well, I agree with you. I blame Congress for most things because Congress should be passing laws. Instead, they've ceded so much of their power over to presidents that enact executive orders. Look, Rick, you and I, a good, committed, progressive Tea Party guy, we probably agree on the solution. We should make it a hell of a lot easier to come into this country legally. We should make it harder to come into this country illegally. We need to clean up our asylum process. And look, the dreamers need permanency. That's it.
Why can't that happen? I mean, because we agree on that.
We do, Rick, and I'm a border hawk. So why can't we agree on that? Because Republicans generally don't want to do anything but secure the border. And Democrats traditionally haven't wanted to devote the resources as much to securing the border. So they've never really come together. It's easy. The solution's easy. The politics are tough.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and this is where I'm at. And I'll be honest, if I'm someone who's on the southern end of the border and I'm looking across that fence, that line, whatever, And I know over there I can feed my kids. There's nothing stopping me from getting there. So we have to have some kind of a policy to make that happen. But more importantly, we've got to figure out how do we keep people at home. And I blame the Tea Party movement for the attacks that they made on our foreign spending and how much we were spending on foreign aid that I think led to a large part of this kind of stuff.
No, you know what, Rick, that's part of it. But I'd say that's a small part of it because, again, the foreign aid
was a minuscule amount.
But it's peanuts. Look, I get it, and I'm with you, Rick. The vast majority of these people coming to our border are good, decent people who want a better way of life. Fine. There's a legal way to do that and an illegal way to do that. And applying for asylum is a perfectly legal way to do it. Now, Rick, you know that most of the people who apply for asylum don't qualify for asylum. So we get these big rushes at the border. 80% of these people, these unaccompanied minors, will not qualify for asylum. This has got to be fixed.
Yeah, I mean, this is really a problem, and it comes back to our
laws.
By
the way, Rick, let me say one more thing.
Go ahead.
Biden deserves. This is Biden's problem. If Trump was a son of a bitch on the border, and he was, these good, decent people down in Central America, Rick, they pay attention to what we do and say up here. You know, for 4 years, they've had a son of a bitch who've said, I'm going to build the wall and deport you all. Okay. And then along comes Joe Biden, who says, I'm going to be the opposite of that. So they listened to what Biden said, and they watched what Biden did right after he got elected. And these good, smart people, Rick, figured now's the time to try to get in.
No, and I agree with you on that. And I believe that they had to be preparing for that to happen. I believe they had to be preparing.
Oh, totally.
They had to be preparing for an influx because you've got all this pent up, all these pent up numbers of people who wanted to come through. Now here's where I have a problem. I'm not a swing the doors open guy, and I'm also not a slam the door shut guy. So the problem is going to be, how do you find that happy median between who you take, where you take from, and how do you do that? I'm curious where you find yourself.
Well, you and I, Rick, very different politically. You don't want people just climbing across the border, do you?
No.
No. So
I want them to come here like my great grandparents did. They came through Ellis Island. They
right. So those are tied together. So right now, the process of becoming a legal American citizen is way too cumbersome. It takes too long and it costs too much money. This is where I'm at odds with much of my former party. Right now, the Republican Party, they want to limit legal immigration as well. We need people here, and we always do better when we welcome immigrants legally. We've got to make that process, though, easier. Right. It just takes too long.
What do you do with the millions of people who are already here in an undocumented fashion? What do you do with the people? And look, I've been saying for a long time, we can't have people in the shadows. We can't have workers who are exploitable. We can't have folks who are some Republicans will call them illegal. I call them undocumented, whatever. That's semantics. We can't have them in the shadows. What do you do with them?
That's the elephant in the room. Now, again, I'm a border hawk, but even I recognize that the dreamers are a special class. These kids who came here as kids through no fault of their own, they need to be given permanency. But, the number of the 11 to 22 people who are in this country illegally, I don't think giving them, Rick, any pathway to citizenship is fair when it comes to everybody else who's been waiting in that line to do it the right way for so many years. So maybe get them out of the shadows, but talk about some sort of legalization, but they shouldn't get any pathway to citizenship before they get in line.
But here's where that rub is then, because you're not going to get people who are going to go out of the country and then try and come back when they've already built lives here. And then Agreed. You're saying, the dreamers should be able to stay so that the children can stay, but the parents have to go. This is where you're just talking about so much chaos.
And this And Rick, this is why the whole damn thing's broken, because every 20 or 30 years we do this and we come down to this one question. All right, Joe, what do we do with that 15 million who are here illegally now? And let's let them all stay. And then we have the problem. Then you and I are going to have the same conversation in another 30 years. Rick and Joe, what do we do now with the next 15 million? We've got to stop this. Because again, it's telling people, come to America, sooner or later, you're going to be fine.
See, again, these are folks who were desperate. They came here because there was opportunity, and you had an employer class who encouraged it. I've talked with people, in fish markets in Massachusetts who tell you, look, they have got recruiters in these countries who say, if you can make it to this town in Massachusetts, you're going to have a job, and this employer will hire you. I'm sorry, I can't be on the side of a policy that's going to be punitive and attack the lowest common denominator. I think we should be going after the employers. We should be going after the people who encouraged it instead of the people who are, I would argue, almost victims of this whole thing.
And Rick, I agree with that, but I think you go after both. Again, go after the employers, go after the corporations. But if you enter this country knowingly, illegally, and we do nothing, then in essence, Rick, you don't have a border. And look, we can't do that. I agree, go after the companies that are hiring these folks. And I agree, most of these folks have the best of intentions. But come on, man, you've got to have a border and enforce your immigration laws, or you're not a sovereign nation.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do over this. I personally don't see. I hold no hope of this being solved anytime soon, and this is going to just be something that the Republicans see as an opportunity to attack Joe Biden over.
I agree, Rick. And by the way, what I just told you means I'd lose in a Republican primary, because I guess I'm not hawkish enough. But it's not only Republicans that play politics with this issue. Both sides like this issue because it revs up their base.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if this is revving up the base, because Biden's getting attacked over not being transparent enough, not allowing photos to come out, not doing enough fast enough. I mean, he's been president 2 months, and I know people who think it should be all done by now.
Well, by the way, that's a separate issue. And if again, shame on the Biden administration, because they should allow our media, i.e. the American people, to see observe, have access to what's going on down there. If the Trump administration didn't give the media access to the facilities where these kids are, you and I would be screaming. The media would be screaming.
No, I'm screaming. I think Biden, the administration, made a mistake. I thought on January 20th they should have parked reporters in there day one to report this is the problem. And be transparent about it through the whole thing. This is what we're trying to do. This stuff takes time. You can't snap your fingers and undo 30 years of ignoring this problem.
Rick, and that's what's inexplicable to me. It's like they were blindsided by this. And you and I know from the moment Biden won back in November, again, these good, decent folks down in Central America, they said, now is our chance. The Biden administration was briefed on this. They should have seen this coming.
Yeah, well, it's not going to go away anytime soon. Do you see any hope for legislation at all?
No, infrastructure, not immigration. No.
Yeah. And that's coming. Today, the news broke $3 trillion they're looking at spending on infrastructure. Is that too much, you think? You were a spending guy.
I don't know. As you and I have talked before, our roads, bridges, and all the rest, man, they haven't been fixed up in years. The infrastructure in this country's fallen apart. So yeah, I don't know what the number is, but that's what our focus should be.
And not just our roads and bridges, but the infrastructure of the 21st century. The reality is whoever controls 5G, and the Chinese are really going full bore ahead. Whoever controls the 5G controls the world.
Agreed. but I don't want to beat a dead horse, Rick, and I know you know this, but our roads and bridges are falling apart. Our pipes are falling apart. I mean, just the basic, bare bones infrastructure in this country has not been updated, fixed in 50, 60, 70, 80 years.
So how did we get here, Joe? I mean, this is another one of those moments where, this used to be, as my friend Bob Ney always said, a yawn vote. Everybody believed in infrastructure. This was nonpartisan. And again, I'm going to go back and I'm going to blame the Tea Party again.
Okay, you blame the Tea Party. I've got an answer for you.
Okay, I'm going to partially blame the Tea Party because they were all against the pork barrel spending. And this was a lot of pork barrel spending. This is what congressmen brought home to their districts.
I'm going to blame the Democratic Party, and I'm going to blame the Republican Party, because for the last 50 to 60 years, longer, we've grown a federal government that is so damn big and does so damn much that the federal government doesn't have the basic money to do the basic things like our infrastructure that it's supposed to do. So, Rick, when guys like me came along back in 2010, because we're $12 trillion in debt, yeah, a bunch of people said no money for anything. But that's because we've got government out there that's so in debt and has been spending money on things it shouldn't focus on instead of things like infrastructure that it should.
See, that's where I would throw back at you. The fact is we cut the top marginal tax rate so badly that we continued our spending and without cutting our spending, but we cut our revenues. And I know Republicans love to say, no, tax cuts pay for themselves. They don't, and they haven't. So we kept spending at the rate we were spending before, and we were giving money away. This has been the lesson, and we've learned it. I don't know that we've learned it.
I think we have a government we can't afford. I mean, pre-pandemic, we were $24 trillion in debt. Yeah. Rick, you and I have talked. Medicare is going to be insolvent in 10 to 12 years. Social Security is a pipe dream right now. We have a government we can't afford, and neither party wants to make some tough decisions.
Well, we got a lot of work ahead of us. Joe, I appreciate the time. Always great talking with you, my friend. I hope you'll come back again and talk with us again.
Always. Thanks, Rick.
Good stuff. Our good friend Joe Walsh. Look, at the end of the day, we may disagree, but I think we want to get down the road to the same direction. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1941. That was the day that the generators began to operate at one of the most massive construction projects ever built, the Grand Coulee Dam. The dam generates hydropower from the Columbia River in Washington state. The completed structure is the largest concrete dam in the world. It's 550 feet tall at its highest point and only 57 feet shy of being a mile wide. The dam is a massive 450 feet thick at its base, tapering to 30 feet at the top. It contains nearly 3 times the concrete of the famed Hoover Dam. 8,000 people attended the opening ceremony. They were led in a parade by the Grand Coulee High School marching band. But not everyone celebrated the dam. The project submerged fishing sites and burial grounds sacred to Native Americans. One area it submerged was Kettle Falls, a place where Native Americans are thought to have fished for 7,000 years. The project also took its toll on its workers. 77 men died while building the dam. One was Gerald Cobble, a 32-year-old worker who was struck and killed by a heavy steel bucket. During the tough times of the Great Depression, men had flocked to Washington in hopes of landing a job. Thousands found work on the project. The workers labored by shifts around the clock to construct the massive foundation. The Coulee Dam became known as the biggest thing on earth and inspired this song by Woody Guthrie.
Well, the world has 7 wonders.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Towers, I guess you know them well. But now the greatest wonder is in Uncle Sam's fair land. It's that King Columbia River and the big Grand Coulee Dam.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the big news today, Marty Walsh, former mayor of Boston, former head of the laborers union up in Boston, head of the building trades up there, confirmed as Secretary of Labor. I think this is like the first time in like 40 some years that someone from labor is actually in charge of the Department of Labor. I mean, this is a big thing, and it shouldn't be. This is the thing that gets me. You know, we have no problem with someone, a big business person, being in charge of the Department of Commerce, but to have a labor person in charge of the Department of Labor and it being this unusual, crazy to me. But I'm thrilled to see Marty Walsh confirmed. Maybe now we'll start to see the Department of Labor actually doing what its mission is, helping workers. Just a thought. And here to share some thoughts on the good news today, I've asked our good friend Phil Glover to come talk with us. Phil is the National Vice President for AFGE District 3, the American Federation of Government Employees. Phil, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick. I appreciate it.
So let's start with Marty Walsh. Good guy, happy with this appointment?
I can't complain about that at all. To have a card-carrying union member, union leader running the Department of Labor, I think is a great step.
What do you think his first things, other than finding the bathroom and where his office is, what do you think the first policies he should be moving towards are?
Well, I think he has to fix. I hope he looks at the workers' comp system. There's been a lot of people that have had controverted claims through workers' comp, especially during COVID. We've had a lot of issues with that as far as presumptive exposure on the job. Our TSA and Bureau of Prisons and VA people are not getting presumption of exposure. And I hope that's one of the things he digs into right away.
Yeah, I see. I'm going on the OSHA side. I would like to protect people from getting sick. As where you're going, hey, we need to protect the people who have already been exposed. I'm like, let's stop people from getting sick and also take care of them.
Well, see, the new COVID relief package has some help in there on COVID relief and with presumption of disease and exposure. The problem is for everybody in this past year who has filed workers' comp claims, they're coming back now saying that the rapid test wasn't appropriate. Well, back at the beginning of this, there wasn't anything but the rapid
That's
test.
all you had, yeah.
So we're hoping that I certainly hope he goes and takes a look at that standard. And certainly on OSHA, you know, we've been struggling with OSHA all over the federal government. So we're happy to have him reinvigorate OSHA.
You know, what's interesting to me is, you know, OSHA was at its strength during the Reagan years. We had, you know, per capita the most inspectors. They did the most inspections. They were the most muscular during the Reagan years. During the Trump years, they fell to the lowest point in its history. So it was put into law in 1970. So since 1970, the Trump years, or the former guy's years, were its weakest moments.
Yeah, I think we've seen a real drop off on inspections and certainly on enforcement. You know, they really have, you know, they've gone to this voluntary compliance thing. And I'm sorry, but large companies are not going to go with voluntary compliance. For instance, we have the meat inspectors, food inspectors that are out there. They're at these plants. We've had a lot of members sick. We've had members die of COVID in those plants because the plant operators were not ordering them to have masks and precautions and those kind of things. And whether our inspectors had them or not, they were still exposed. So I certainly hope OSHA gets into that issue.
No, I'm right there with you. So last question on Marty Walsh, because, you know, how much can he do? how much can we expect for him to do as labor secretary?
Well, I think number one, he can guide the cabinet, right? I think he can speak out for labor when they're in these cabinet sessions or, convening in different meetings and those kind of things. I think he can be a real voice in the room for labor, and he understands it. He's not just, parroting something that he read somewhere. He understands it. And I really believe that he can keep the administration on track on labor issues. And I think that would be a good thing. If you go back to, certainly history, Frances Perkins, she really was the voice in the room.
Right.
We need to do this. We need to do this. And sometimes she went out there on a limb, and I hope he goes out on some limbs.
And Frances Perkins obviously was FDR's labor secretary.
Right.
We're going way back.
Yeah. I just saw a documentary on her, so I just had a sense that he could be that kind of person for the Biden administration.
Yeah. Look, I've said, recently that Joe Biden is probably the most pro-union president that I've had in my lifetime, hands down. Just on day one, when he fired Peter Robb and the number 2 woman, got them out of the general counsel's office with the NLRB. To me, that was the most pro-union move any president in my lifetime's made. And then he came out with the statement that, supervisors shouldn't be harassing workers. Workers should have the right to organize. They should have the right to choose, and alluded to saying, hey, people in Alabama, I'm talking to you. To me, this is that marching towards getting the government to pursue the National Labor Relations Act as it was meant to be. The government promoting people to join and form unions, to keep industrial peace and to raise wages and conditions.
Yeah, I believe that a lot of the things that he has done in the first 2 months, he certainly has given a signal to labor that he's on their side. I think the rank and file, and you and I have talked about this before, firing the general counsel for the NLRB is and I won't say inside baseball, but it certainly is something that maybe the rank and file members just don't pay attention to. And so, but the case law that comes out of there and the decisions that come out of there affect every piece of workers' rights across the country. So certainly firing him on, he gave him a chance to resign, and he chose not to take it. So
no, I preferred him being fired, to be honest with you. I preferred him to be fired in the most unceremonious of ways. As an at-will employee, there's the door. But for me, it was much more than him just being fired. It was the symbolism, I think, that I'm hoping comes out of this, because Peter Robb was one of the guys during the Reagan years who was part of the Patco firing. Right. What I've been saying is for years is it was the shot heard across the boardroom, which meant it's open season on workers. By him being fired, I'm hoping this is the shot being volleyed back the other way.
Well, I know between that and some of the other terminations that he did within the first couple weeks, it was a shock to some people, I think. Some of these longer term people, I think his appointments to the Postal Board will make a difference, once these 3 nominees get in there. Also, he fired the entire Federal Services Impasses panel, which deals with federal disputes over bargaining. And they had been as anti-union as anything you've seen. The first year of that panel, they would go further than management's proposal. If management gave you a proposal on, say, use of agency facilities, they would come in and say, no, we're not even going to listen to management here. We're going to go worse. And they did that for the first year and a half until we sued them, till AFG sued them. And then they kind of settled down a little bit. But it's still, their decision making has been horrible. So he fired them. I think that was about a month ago, I would say.
Yeah.
So
now, one of the things that President Biden has done is he signed a bunch of executive orders, basically trying to undo all of the damage that the last guy did. In fact, there were the three executive orders that the last guy signed, attacking your members and your organization, that Biden has undone. Can you tell me real quick the three things that the last guy did? And is Biden moving us back towards undoing that damage? And if not, can Walsh be a guy that moves us faster in that direction?
Well, I think that what Biden has done is in one executive order, he eliminated three, actually, I think it was four of Trump's executive orders that were anti-union and anti-employee. Those included representational time to represent your members. And what people don't understand about the federal sector is we have to represent everybody. We're an open shop. And so official time years ago was a trade-off for a closed shop. And so we were supposed to have negotiated official time. So they took that. They kicked unions out of their negotiated office space. They changed a lot of the bargaining rules as far as collective bargaining, limited bargaining to 18 weeks on a national contract, which is almost unheard of. So all of these things. But the Biden order, it's Executive Order 14003, what it does is it restores all those things. It actually says to rescind and restore anything that was done on the basis of those executive orders to pre-executive order operations.
Kind of like a reset button.
Exactly, like a complete reset. Even contracts that were done, Social Security and different contracts, told them to go back and take out the portions that had anything to do with those executive orders, which is huge. The problem for us is that some of these agency managers have dug in like ticks, and they have gotten used to the Trump way, and now we're having a battle back and forth to get them to implement the executive order as intended by the President of the United States.
Now, what do you say to the person who goes, Phil, we're 2 months into this. Give the man a little time.
Well, see, I think he took his action. He did 14003, the Office of Personnel Management, on March 5th, sent out guidance to all federal agencies on how to implement and each section what to do. So now it's up to the agency heads, and it's up to the managers and the directors and all of those folks. And they're playing dumb. I had one the other day. I have one from the Veterans Benefit Administration in Philadelphia, Lily Newble. She right away, well, we're just waiting on guidance. We actually emailed her the guidance from OPM, and she still can't seem to make a decision. She has an executive, an HR director, Alina Giampa, that is just nasty with unions, nasty. And, to us, it's like, look, the pendulum has swung. Your management, you need to understand, there's a new administration, and you need to follow what they're doing. I'm not blaming Biden for not reaching down now after 2 months. And he did what he was supposed to do. The administration now has to obviously police this. They got to tell agencies, no, the president was serious. The chief of staff, people up at those levels need to come down at the agencies and say, look, he's not kidding. And I think the tie-in to Marty Walsh is that he's not kidding. Here he put a guy in the cabinet that is a labor leader. And so, and some of the other picks that he's making in different places are sending that signal. But you still have these folks that, they're going to be in denial for a while, I think. And we are going to have to just keep, pounding away and raising the issue of this. Yes. We had an HR person, a labor relations person. I saw an email this morning out of our Pentagon Force Protection who said they declined to bargain over 7106B1, which is permissive subjects that our union asked to bargain over. They declined to do it, whether President Biden signed an executive order or not. That's just going to have to be unacceptable, Rick. I mean, it's just going to have to be.
So, I mean, isn't this where the secretary of whatever that division goes, do it or there's the door?
Well, we are going to have to work our processes and go up the chain. And it's like the VA. We have a new secretary over there. We have a new chief of staff. There's been meetings over there about our representational rights, but they're still not restored. And that's after you have a Secretary of the VA. So, we hope that the White House keeps sending the right signals, and we hope the agency heads. These are not hard things, by the way.
Right.
These agencies, there were mechanisms in place up until 2018, and even past that, to grant official time for representatives. There was already people on what was called 100% time. There were already office spaces. Now, they might have gave away one of the offices, but they could certainly find similar size space to give it back. These are not difficult things. And that's what's driving me a little, making me a little bit animated, because these are not hard things. They had them. The agencies took them away pretty quick when Mr. Trump signed his executive orders. But they don't seem to want to just, if I'm a hospital director at the VA in Philly, right? I know what office space I took away from the VA union.
Right.
I know what, so I can go to that president and say, hey, I read the executive order. I read the guidance. Hey, let's go look for an office.
Do your
How's
job.
this?
Do your job.
This is not, waiting is not difficult.
No, just do your job. But this is another one of those examples, and this is what I tell my union brothers and sisters. When you lose something, it's almost impossible to get it back. That climb to get just back to where you were. And this is where my fear is, in the next election, we end up with a Republican governor here in Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania becomes a right to work state. And then you end up having to fight that hill. And hopefully at some point, if it does happen, you're able to claw it back. But it's a long, long slog.
Yeah, I can only hope that in that scenario, and that's a scary one, I can only hope that we can use whatever Montana did to fight theirs off, because I know a lot of work was done up there. I felt that legislature, if any, was going to go ahead and implement. And those guys, those men and women in labor up there really put it to the ground and was able to stop it. And I hope in Pennsylvania, we're going to have to do the same thing.
Yeah, we got a lot of work for us, and good on my Teamster sister Erin Foley and her union out in Montana. I had her on the program talking about this back then. They did a great job. But Phil, I appreciate you taking some time for us, sharing some thoughts. I wish you the best, and I hope you'll come back and talk with us again real soon.
Thank you, Rick, for everything as always.
Good
Have a
stuff.
good night.
Our good friend Phil Glover, National Vice President of AFGE District 3. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. At some time during your life, you've probably read a book or heard a story by Mark Twain. But did you know that this renowned American author was also a strong supporter of labor? In 1835, he was born Samuel Clemens in the town of Hannibal, Missouri. He died of pneumonia when Samuel was only 11. The next year, he became a printer's apprentice, working for 4 years for little pay, often under horrible conditions. As a young man, he tried his hand as a riverboat pilot on the Mississippi River and as a miner in Nevada and California. He took inspiration from the people and stories he encountered on his travels, writing under the pen name Mark Twain. Twain was a lifelong member of the International Typographical Union, and on this day in labor history, the year was 1886. Mark Twain delivered a powerful speech to the Monday Evening Club in Hartford, Connecticut. In it, he imagined the power of a united labor movement. He said, when all the bricklayers and all the machinists and all the miners and blacksmiths and printers and hod carriers and stevedores and house painters and brakemen and engineers and factory hands and all the shop girls and all of the sewing machine women and all of the telegraph operators, in a word, all the myriads of toilers in whom is slumbering the reality of that thing which you call power. When these rise, call the vast spectacle by any deluding name that will please your ear, but the fact remains that a nation has risen. In his speech, Twain painted a vivid picture of workers and of the nation rising together as one. as attacks against unions and working people mount today. Now more than ever, we need such a vision of solidarity.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Hunters have come up with euphemisms to make what they do sound, well, less unpleasant. For example, animals aren't killed, they're harvested. Corporate America is now adopting this verbal ploy, for CEOs urgently need to soften the image of their constant hunt for ways to kill jobs. Their urgency is that they're now pushing a huge new surge in cuts, this time targeting college-educated, white-collar professionals. Their weapon is the same sort of neutron bomb they've used to dispatch millions of blue-collar workers, robots. But robot is a negative term, so it's been replaced with a nondescript acronym, RPAs, Robotic Process Automation. These sophisticated automatons are armed with artificial intelligence, enabling them to take over cognitive work that had been the niche of such highly paid humans as financial analysts, lawyers, engineers, managers, doctors. More than just an incremental extension of a long, slow automation process, this is a big bang. It's presently ripping through the workforce at warp speed, and most of America's vulnerable employees have no idea of what's coming. In a survey of corporate executives last year, nearly 80% of them had already put some forms of RPA in place, with an additional 16% planning to do so within 3 years. McKinsey, the world's biggest corporate strategy consultant, calculates that these thinking robots will displace 45 million U.S. workers in this decade. This is Jim Hightower saying, returning to the hunting analogy, professional jobs requiring human-level judgment have been presumed to be beyond the range of robotic firepower. But as one labor economist now notes, with the mass deployment of RPA technology, that type of work is much more in the kill path. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by the Lowdown Happy Hour, live streamed from the Chat and Chew Cafe. Details at hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the right wing is basically apoplectic over the fact that there may be talk of raising taxes on the very wealthy, and they want you to believe they're coming for you. They want you to believe that any talk of tax increases means that working stiffs are going to get stuck with the bill, which is how things have been for way too long. We cut taxes on the very wealthy. They get wealthier and wealthier. They store it away, and we end up getting lower wages, less government service, and obviously a much bigger national debt. And I'm hoping Biden does raise taxes and move us in the direction of the good socialist president, Dwight David Eisenhower. But we got a lot of work to do. And this pandemic, I got to be honest, the pandemic has shown us some stuff. That we are really the two Americas that John Edwards talked about back in the early 2000s. And it ain't good for us. And here to share some thoughts on how our billionaires have made out and lined their pockets, I've asked Bob Lord to come talk with us. Bob's a council member for he's a counselor for Americans for Tax Fairness, also an associate fellow for the Institute for Policy Studies. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm looking at the beginning of the pandemic till now. We're almost a year, give or take a day or so. How are our billionaires doing?
Oh, Rick, they are killing it. They've increased their wealth by $1.3 trillion in that year. Just the top 15 billionaires have added over half a trillion dollars of wealth. It's unbelievable what's taken place over the last year.
And
let me just throw one more kind of eye-popping statistic out. Of all the wealth that's been, of the entire increase in wealth, and the country actually has increased its wealth over the last year, over 1% of that has gone to just one guy, Elon Musk. We've got a country of 330 million people, and 1 out of every $100 of the wealth increase went to just one guy.
How is that possible?
Well, it's possible in a society that's just concentrating more and more and more wealth into those at the very top. If you take the top 0.01%, that's the top 1 out of every 10,000 households. Back in 1980, that group held a little over 2% of our wealth. Now they hold very close to 10%. So this little tiny group, 13,000 households in the entire country, has gone from 2%, a little over 2%, to 10% of the country's wealth. $1 in $10 of wealth is held by 1 in 10,000 people.
Wow. And I argue it goes back to our policies. We made these decisions. This goes back to the supply side voodoo Reaganomics, and hey, if we give the rich more money, they're going to know what to do with it. And look, I give the right credit; they've stuck to their ideology, because all I've heard this weekend was how tax cuts create more economic activity, and we make more money, and we have to have more tax cuts.
Rick, in the last 40 years, maybe 43 years, from just before Reagan took office, but accelerating a lot once Reagan took office, we've implemented a policy of taxing work more and taxing wealth less. And that's what's happened. When you tax work more and you tax wealth less, the wealth is going to keep flowing to the very, very top. And that's what we've seen happen.
Yeah, I mean,
and the proof is in the numbers.
No, but here's the thing. I mean, I had a listener send me this clip of some guy who's on, I think, like Newsmax. And, he was talking about, how they're going to raise everybody's taxes and it's all bad. And the best economies are because, we cut taxes. And there's study after study that shows these tax cuts don't have the kind of lasting effect that even short-term boost spending, like for food stamps or for child nutrition programs or any of those short-term programs do. But yet there's that blind faith ideology.
Well, sure, because if you help the folks at the bottom who need money to put food on the table and pay the rent and so forth, the money's going to get spent. It's going to be pumped into the economy. If you help folks at the very, very top, it's just going to go into their bank accounts or their stock portfolios. And that's why you see the stock market doing the way it is, because there's more and more wealth chasing all this stock, all the stock market shares that are out there. Absolutely. And as far as the tax increases hurting working folks, I'm working on two tax areas right now, Rick. One is the estate tax, and one is Elizabeth Warren's wealth tax proposal. Well, her wealth tax proposal applies to folks worth over $50 million. Those aren't working people.
Yeah, I don't know a lot of them.
And the estate tax right now applies if you die with over 11.7 million in your estate. Those aren't working people either. These are really, really rich people.
Yeah, and I go back to when you talk about the estate tax. The first person to ever pay the estate tax was John D. Rockefeller. And he was taxed, if I remember right, and you would be the expert on this, at something like 70%. And yet there are still rich Rockefellers today, interestingly enough.
I think that there probably were a couple folks before Rockefeller who paid the estate tax. But you're right that the rate when he died, I think he died in the 30s sometime, like the late 30s, if I remember.
Right.
The rate was around 70% back then.
Yeah. No, I thought he was actually the first, but even still, he still paid 70%, and there are still rich Rockefellers today. But here's the thing that gets me: we keep hearing about we need to lower the tax rates. Because if we lower the tax rates, because the Laffer curve, everyone loves to point out the Laffer curve. You got to find that spot where people aren't going to spend money to avoid paying taxes. And the Wall Street Journal, had a piece today about an IRS report that showed that the top 1% of households fail to report about 21% of their income. which means they're lying and cheating on their taxes, even though Trump dropped it down to a very low rate. And I go back to, it doesn't matter what the rate is, even if it's 1%, they're going to try and figure out how to get out of it.
That's absolutely right. And the crux of the problem is that when somebody gets a W-2 at the end of the year for the wages they've been paid, they better put that on their tax return. But when some business owner makes money, nobody generally reports what they've been paid to the government. So they have free rein to put that on their tax return or not put it on. Maybe they'll get caught, but the odds aren't very high. I think the percentage of millionaire tax returns that are audited now is under 1%.
And that isn't new. I mean, if you remember back in the Bush years, there were the stories of they were moving auditors away from going after the really complicated, tax returns of the wealthy and going after, middle income and working class people. Because, when they cheat a little bit on, hey, I bought an extra pair of gloves this week, they were easier to go after. And, because those complicated cases with teams of attorneys, that's difficult work.
Oh yeah, because you're right. They have the dough to hire the attorneys to defend them, and it forces the IRS to put in a lot of hours to pursue that. Whereas some guy takes the wrong deduction or something like that, he can't go out and hire a lawyer. There's less at stake than he'd have to pay in legal fees.
Yeah, it's amazing to me because you talk to people about taxes. Look, none of us like paying taxes. I've only met a handful of people who go, yeah, I like paying my taxes, and they have been very wealthy people who, hey, I've got the money, I'd be happy to pay it, and it's less than I would have. I'm going to be quiet. I don't know anybody else who really likes paying taxes, but it's the price of admission. It's the price of being a citizen of this country and getting the things that we get. And yet you have so many people at the top and these, like you said, these big businesses and who figured out every loophole, lobbied for every loophole, and created a tax system that basically holds them unaccountable. But the rest of us, man, as you said, with the W-2s, they know every dime. Is there a way to create a system? And I know the Wall Street or the New York Times this weekend had an idea of banks doing something. Is there a way to do the same thing to the wealthy to make sure that they're paying for what they're earning?
I think there are ways to increase the reporting of money that's paid to businesses and to to high-end medical practices and so forth. But really, the way to do it is to just invest more money in the IRS for the specific purpose of increasing the investigation of the folks at the top.
No.
It's embarrassing that more, on a percentage basis, more poor people claiming the earned income tax credit are audited than millionaires are. So, and I think that the statistic is for every dollar that's invested in auditing high-end taxpayers, we get back between $5 and $7 in taxes. So why not do it?
That sounds like money well spent to me.
Sure.
Especially when they're talking about, according to the New York Times story, somewhere like $1.4 trillion in uncollected taxes. We could use that money to invest in, I don't know, infrastructure. There's a talk of a $3 trillion infrastructure bill. That sounds like almost half of it. It sounds like a worthwhile endeavor.
Some roads, some bridges, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I've taken the position, and I have a lot of conservative listeners who, they've been beaten into this idea that we have to have really low business taxes, we have to have really low, top marginal tax rates, because that's the only way people are going to invest. That's the only way economic activity can possibly happen. And I say, when we were the strongest as a country when we were paying our bills was back during the good socialist years of Dwight David Eisenhower, where we had a 92% top marginal tax rate, where the corporate tax rate was almost 50%. You had really high levels. Now, understand, nobody paid 92%, but they paid a lot more than they do now. And we didn't have the kind of obscene wealth that you've talked about at the beginning, where you've got a handful of real winners and then the rest of us getting screwed. So it's my idea. We got to go back to something of much higher tax rates on the very well-to-do, and pay our bills, but two, also invest in our country like we used to in the old days. Am I off base?
No, the country did its best when we had the most progressive tax structure we've ever had, and when wealth and income were distributed as evenly as they ever were distributed. And by the way, it wasn't distributed that evenly then. The wealthy were plenty wealthy back then. They just weren't as obscenely wealthy as they are now. But if you look at, I don't think, Rick, that a lot of people get how much $1 billion is, or in the case of Jeff Bezos, $180 billion is. If you arrived with Columbus in 1492, and each day since then you added $1 million to your wealth, and you were still alive today, you'd be just about tied with Bezos. That's how much money that's how much wealth he has. I mean, there's just staggering sums of money.
And he wasn't even the richest guy in the world. I mean, for a while, Musk was. But here's the thing: is that good for democracy? Is that good as a country to have these handful of oligarchs, is what they are, who have such enormous control over media, over policy, over our government? Is that healthy for a democracy to have that outweighed strength in the hands of such few people?
Well, I think it was Louis Brandeis said that we could have democracy, or we could have wealth concentrated in the hands of a few people, or something like that, but we can't have both. And we're losing our democracy to that. The control that these ultra rich have is far, far too great. Yeah.
Now, the Rand Corporation did a study not too long ago. I guess Nick Hanauer and David Rolfe had commissioned this, and they came out with just an eye-popping number of something like $100 trillion over the last 45 years that's been extracted from the working class of this country and elevated upward to our billionaire class. And their argument was it comes down to our tax code, it comes down to deindustrialization, and it comes down to basically the pandering to corporate America. We made those choices. I often argue that we can unmake those choices and make our society a little bit more equal.
We could. And really, if we could just go after the very, very top, if we could just look at this wealth tax proposal of Elizabeth Warren, where it's only the folks above 50 million who are paying just a couple cents more in tax per $100 of wealth. And if we look at the estate tax, where there's virtually no estate tax paid in this country anymore. I'm familiar with this because I am a tax lawyer, and even a billionaire, if they invest enough time in it, they can completely zero out their estate tax bill.
Right?
Can't we just tighten up those rules so that somebody worth $1 billion, so that 50% of their wealth is taken off the top at that time? Their kids will still inherit $500 million. That's still a lot of wealth.
But what do you say to the person who goes, well, but come on, Bob, they paid taxes on all that. They shouldn't be taxed on death. It's the death tax, Bob. Come on.
Look, the reality, Rick, is that if taxes on the very, very wealthy are not significant enough, more and more of our wealth will concentrate at the top. So we either tax more or we have more concentrated wealth. And I know that I'd prefer to tax the the Elon Musks and of the world, a good bit more. They'll still be fine. They'll still be really fine. But the rest of us will have decent roads to drive on, decent schools to send our kids to. We might be able to avoid a climate disaster, things like that. It's our choice.
Yeah. Again, it comes down to choices, and we've been making the wrong one. And I would argue it's because so many people think that they're eventually going to be Jeff Bezos, that they're going to, and I wish them well, but the sad reality is very few people get there.
I think there is an element of that. And the unfortunate thing is that kind of wealth doesn't make you any happier. If you can go from making $50,000 a year to $100,000 a year, it probably will add to your happiness. But going from $1 million of wealth to a gazillion million doesn't do anything. If you can't be happy with a wealth of around $1 million and an income of around $100,000, you're just not going to be happy.
No, it's an excellent point. And I would argue, this is why we see the division that we have in this country, because there are so many people at the bottom who are struggling. There are so many of us on the in the working class that are having a hard time keeping the roof over our heads and food on the table, because we have these horrible policies that have crushed the ability for workers to organize and earn better wages. Just my thought. But, again, it's going to come down to policy. So last question I've got for you, in looking at Biden's proposal, because I'm told there's this grand proposal going to raise taxes, through the roof. Is it enough?
It's a good start. Is it enough? Probably not initially, but it's a good start. He's
talking
finally a
about
start in the right direction.
He's talking about taking it all the way up to 39% from where it is now, right? The top marginal tax rate?
Well, look, I think they are talking about going up to 39%, but they're also talking about taxing capital gains, which have had a huge preference, taxing capital gains instead of at 23% at the 39%. So these are good changes. Does it have to be more? Yes. And here's where it really has to change, I think, Rick. If you compare the way things are now with the tax structure to where it was, say, 50 years ago, everyone in the bottom 99% is facing about the same tax structure on their income. I mean, it's changed a little, but it hasn't moved that much.
Right.
And even those who are at the very bottom of the 1%, of the top 1%, it's about the same. What's really changed is it used to be that once you got into the 1%, the rates kept going up and up and up. That if you were one of those at the very top in the 0.1% or the 0.01%, your rate was a lot higher than some doctor who barely was in the top 1%. That's no longer the case. The rates flatten out. Once you get into the top 1%, the billionaire is taxed at the same income tax rate as the doctor making $500,000 a year.
No, and what that
that's
also
a big difference.
And what I would argue that also did is it disincentivized, those at the very, very top from donating libraries and medical buildings and all of those other things as a tax dodge. They now just keep the money.
Oh yeah, if your top rate is 80%, that means every time you make a charitable contribution, it's only costing you 20 cents on the dollar.
Yep. No, we definitely need a major overhaul, and this is a step in the right direction. Bob, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much. I hope you'll come back and talk to us again soon.
Thanks for having me.
Good stuff, Bob Lord. He's the counsel over at the Americans for Tax Fairness, americansfortaxfairness.org. The website, we'll get links out on how you can take a look at that. He's also an associate fellow there at the Institute for Policy Studies. Good stuff. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, And this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1972. That was the day the Equal Rights Amendment passed the U.S. Senate and moved to the states for ratification. It had passed the House the previous fall. Alice Paul and Crystal Eastman of the National Women's Party first wrote the ERA in the 1920s. It was to Congress in 1923. The revised version that Congress passed in 1971 and 1972 stated simply, equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of sex. The amendment needed 38 states to ratify by March of 1979 in order to pass. 35 states ratified the amendment, but 5 states later rescinded ratification. The 38 state requirement was never met. The decades-long debate among women's rights advocates often centered on formal equality versus protective legislation for women workers. But an amendment establishing equality meant the end to restrictive discriminatory laws. These included laws imposing restriction on a woman's right to buy or sell property or to conduct a business, the age at which women could marry, differing admission standards for boys and girls in tax-supported educational institutions, laws establishing different jail sentences by sex for identical crimes, regulations denying unemployment compensation payments to pregnant women who are still able and willing to work, and much more. The far right and religious fundamentalists of all faiths fiercely opposed the ERA, fearing it would erode traditional gender roles. Many progressives and the labor movement also opposed it for many years on the basis that hard-won protective legislation would be lost. It is striking that, as of 2017, there is still no clear legal codification of women's equal status to men.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I said, over the weekend, I had a number of listeners send me this guy from Newsmax's piece about how the government comes and takes your tax money with a gun to your head. And, he went through this whole belief structure, citing very right-wing sources like the Washington Times, about how all of the tax cuts of the past supposedly created these giant booms and created millions of jobs and did all this incredible stuff. And I go back to, when Bill Clinton raised taxes during his term, that's when we created millions of jobs. And it comes down to, just some common sense stuff. When you're talking about tax cuts, the first question you have to ask is, for whom? Are we cutting taxes on Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and Bill Gates? If that's the case, sorry, that's not helpful. It's not. If we're cutting taxes on, on Joe Sixpack, on Jane carrying the jelly bucket to work, that I think will help. I think that will stimulate the economy, because at the end of the day, economic activity is all about demand. It's all about people having money to spend, those dollars being generated reverberating through the economy, and entrepreneurs and businesses wanting to service that demand and creating jobs to meet that demand, which is why government spending is a huge part of this, which is why SNAP benefits are some of the best bang for the buck to actually stimulate an economy. Tax cuts way down on the list. Infrastructure spending way up on the list. So when I hear people go, no, Rick, I think you got it wrong here. We just give the money to the very rich people and they'll generate Wall Street. They'll invest. And what they end up doing is we're just buying the same shares over and over and playing this game. And we know that they're avoiding paying taxes. We know that they're doing everything they can possibly do to not pay. Because look, that's almost like an American sport. And we've had presidents of the past, Bush, the former guy here, the last one, doing the same thing with the IRS. No, don't worry about those rich people because they've got lawyers to fight us. Go after those poor people who are helpless and defenseless. Let's go after them. We can kick them. which serves a double purpose. Understand, this isn't just because they want you to pay higher taxes. No, they want to screw with you so that you hate the IRS. You know, the organization that will go after the rich people to get the taxes that they're owed, $1.4 trillion, according to an IRS study. The rich people in this country have stiffed us $1.4 trillion in uncollected taxes. I mean, stop and think about this for a second. Just step back and go, who benefits by bad-mouthing the IRS at every turn? How many people do you know have been audited? I know a couple people, and they were, you owe us like $1,500. And it's annoying. It's a pain in the neck. And as my accountant says, if you ever get called in for an audit, just say, how much do I owe you? Write them a check and leave. That's not how the wealthy in this country do it. No. These are people who will spend $100 to save a dime. These are people who will fight to the end and make it as costly as possible so that it's painful enough that the IRS goes, we're not going to do that anymore. Because we've allowed that to happen. We've created a system to allow that to happen. And as Bob said, for every dollar we spend on the IRS going after and enforcing our tax laws against the very wealthy, it comes back $5 to $7. Seems like a really good investment to me. But you know what? Here again, the people pushing the tax cuts, especially during the former guys' years, those are their donors. Those are their folks. So they love the fact that anytime someone says the tax word, we start foaming at the mouth. I don't want to pay taxes. I don't want to pay a death tax. I actually had someone ask me, a parent had passed and left them a house that was worth maybe $100,000. And he's going, I'm going to have to pay the estate tax. And I'm going, why? Is the house worth $11 million? He's like, no. He goes, but I'm going to have to pay estate tax. I go, no, you don't. Way up here, way out of your league. And I said, actually, I'd be happy to pay the estate tax because it means I got $11 million. But we don't think about this stuff that way. And for me, the sad reality is we've been basically bamboozled over the last 50 years. Because tax cuts haven't done what they were promised. All it means is we borrowed money to give the very wealthy. And this is what I love hearing about the right now. We're borrowing money to give everyone $1,400 and that's bad. I'll bet you, and I'm willing to bet this, on the other side of this pandemic, when we look back, the stimulative effect of giving people that $1,400 will far outweigh anything that the Reagan, Bush, former guys' tax cuts ever did. Because you're giving the money to people who are going to spend it immediately, who are going to put it back into the economy. I'll bet you. So I'm looking forward to a much higher tax rate. I think we need it. I think we need a progressive tax rate. And for those who don't know, during the good socialist president Dwight David Eisenhower, and I say that as a joke, Eisenhower was a Republican who would be unrecognizable in this current climate. A guy who said that anyone who comes out against the Farm Bill, unemployment, labor laws, Social Security, that they'd never be heard from in our political history. But there are a few. He said their numbers are negligible and they're stupid. Stupid is completely running the Republican Party, mind you. But Ike was not a socialist, but he had a progressive tax code that every $2,000 all the way up to 92%, it went up incrementally. The more you earned, the bigger your shoulders, the more you paid, the more you carried. It's what we should have. And the disincentive was for people to hoard huge amounts of money because we didn't want that kind of outweighed power that someone like Bezos or someone like Musk or Gates has over our policy. We want to be in charge of our policy. Going to be interesting to see where this goes because the paid mouthpieces are out there spinning the yarn that, no, tax cuts are good, tax increases are bad. I'm telling you, they're wrong. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Tornadoes touched down today in several states, causing some serious damage.
U.S. extreme weather whiplash, blizzards in the north, extreme tornado outbreaks in the south. Meanwhile, drought deepens in the western U.S. and Europe. Plus,
we knew at the time that we were making a bit of a financial mess, and now we're doing our best to clean it up.
Top Texas utility regulator caught, promising to protect investors over consumers.
Oops. All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Scientists have recently confirmed that the Earth has a hidden layer, and no one knows exactly what it is. Please be nougat, please be nougat, please be nougat.
Delicious. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, we saw this coming. Bad news for the Southeast.
It was a big rash of extreme weather this week. Wyoming got buried beneath a rare, record-breaking blizzard that trapped National Weather Service meteorologists in their offices for 5 days. And that dangerous outbreak of tornadoes pummeled the Deep South on Wednesday, garnering a rare level 5 out of 5 warning from the National Weather Service because of its exceptional intensity and geographical spread. As we go to air, the full extent of the damage is still unknown, but electricity has been knocked out to tens of thousands of customers from Arkansas to Alabama. That's because U.S. utilities say it's too costly to bury power lines like in Europe, so taxpayers get to pay for repeated damages.
Europe can afford it, but America, we're just too poor.
CBS meteorologist Jeff Berardelli reports that man-made global warming appears to be changing tornado risk in the U.S. Tornado numbers overall are not trending upward. However, the start of tornado season has moved up nearly 2 weeks since the 1970s. Major tornado outbreaks are now more frequent, and as the West gets warmer and drier due to climate change, Tornado Alley is pushing further east, with tornado outbreak frequency decreasing in the Plains states and increasing in humid southern states, where population density is much higher. And the western U.S. is definitely getting drier. The U.S. Federal Drought Monitor reports that the current drought plaguing most of the West during 2020 has extended into 2021, and precipitation deficits have intensified, with mountain snowpacks well below average. The monitor says the current drought is the biggest in 20 years in terms of geographical area. Almost 80% of the western U.S. is now in drought, nearly half in extreme or exceptional drought.
That's not good.
And it's even worse in Europe. A new study suggests that a series of severe droughts and heat waves in Europe since 2014 are the most extreme in more than 2,000 years.
Well, unlike the U.S., Europe can afford to do something about it.
More fallout from the extreme winter deep freeze that knocked out Texas's deregulated electric grid last month. The chairman of the Texas Public Utility Commission, Arthur D'Andrea, has resigned after getting caught on tape promising big investor groups that he'd protect their massive windfall profits by pressuring the state legislature to not reverse or reprice more than $16 billion in overcharges to consumers during storm outages.
Really?
You know, it's also become a political question here at the state. There's some very important people that do not want to reprice full stop, and some very important people that do. But right now, it's just a contentious political issue, and I'm advising on it, and the best I can do is put the weight of the commission in favor of not repricing for the reasons I said.
Oh, nice. So the Utility Commission is going to take the side of the wealthy investors and the corporations. To hell with the Texans.
Yep, and so far, the Republican-controlled state legislature is taking no action to protect Texas ratepayers.
Oh, I'm sure they're just fine with what he did. I understand they have just a few days where they could pass a law to do something for Texans, but I guess they're in no rush to do that either.
Nope. In other news, broadcast TV networks' coverage of climate change declined in 2020. A new analysis by Media Matters found that overall coverage of climate change on corporate broadcast TV nightly news and Sunday shows in 2020 dropped by more than 50% over the previous year. Now, that was primarily due to the coronavirus pandemic taking up a lot of airtime, but it was also the lowest amount of coverage of climate since 2016, even though 2020 shattered the record for the highest number of billion-dollar extreme weather disasters in the U.S.
Well, they were busy covering that other force of nature, the one who we voted out last November.
Finally, some good-ish news. It appears that 3 last-minute Trump administration rollbacks of pollution rules won't go into effect because of the violent insurrection at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. Hard copy versions of the rollbacks, required by law before a rule can take effect, were apparently destroyed when the mob ransacked the Senate parliamentarian's office.
So sad. For much more on all of those stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So evidently the U.S. Supreme Court's about, I guess they're going to consider whether to reinstate the death penalty against the guy, I can't pronounce his name. He was the convicted bomber in the Boston Marathon back in 2013. I guess one of the lower courts overturned it, and we'll see if the Supreme Court will reinstate it. I personally am not a supporter of the death penalty. I know this is a horrible thing, and probably someone deserves it. But I've never been in favor of state-sponsored murder. And personally, I'd rather see this person rot in a cage for every day of their life. And I know that's cruel and unusual, but I just think the death penalty, the state doing it, I'm not in favor of it at all. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day, our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst, Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you, Rick.
So what do you think of this? The Supreme Court jumping in the middle of this. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's the U.S. Court of Appeals in Boston upheld, and I'm not good at this name, but Tsarnaev's convictions on 27 counts. But the appeals court ruled that his death sentence should be overturned because the trial judge had not questioned jurors closely enough about their exposure to pretrial publicity. So I'm not sure if this ruling would affect the death sentence, period across the United States. I think it will be narrowed into this case.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. But how much? This is the thing that's going on with the Chauvin case in Minneapolis. That you're not going to ever have a juror who hasn't heard about it,
right?
And isn't going to have an opinion about it. This is that. What is sufficiently screen the jurors for bias? What does that mean? How far do you have to go? Isn't that what the lawyers were supposed to do? Isn't that what the voir dire is and all that?
Well, yes. I mean, jury selection, and in a high-profile, case like this, it would be difficult to find anybody that didn't know about it.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how the Supreme Court will rule, but I don't know if that then creates a precedent in all high-profile cases for the death penalty issue or not. I don't know. But I think this most likely will affect, again, his case. Then somebody could argue other high-profile cases. But then what's the litmus test of high profile? Of which case would be what?
Yeah.
So I'm not a Supreme Court expert, but it'll be interesting just to see what they do say about it.
Where do you find yourself on the death penalty? You think you should get the shock, or where are you at?
Well, I two ways how to answer that. I support the death penalty. In fact, I just had a law professor from Akron spend an hour on the phone with me because Ohio is going to run some ads. People who used to support the death penalty now that they don't, So I had an interesting conversation with her. But to answer a different way too is this: in his case, I mean, it might be nice if he just has to be in one room with 1 hour a day to see daylight for the rest of his life.
Yeah, I mean that's where my mind is.
That's what I'm saying. Even though I, have still supported the death penalty, I just with appeal processes, but I just think maybe the punishment would be greater if he, at his young age, has, because I think I read up on a case I think he's in one of those, small rooms, and you are allowed 45 minutes a day or something to look at the sky.
Yeah.
Through a window.
No, I'm. My problem is our system is so flawed, and generally it's poor people that end up getting it. I just think there's too much that can go wrong, and you see every day, you see all the time. People have spent 20, 30, 40 years in jail, and you find out, oh, oops, not them. I guess it was somebody else. Oops. And if you kill somebody, there's no going back on that. And that's where my mind is. Now, I'll make the caveat that I do understand vigilante justice. I don't condone it, but I understand it. Somebody touches my kids, that's a problem for them. But I don't believe in state-sponsored murder.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That's simple. Now let's move on to. Evidently, the Justice Department's in the process of, I guess, engaging in some plea talks with a lot of these the insurrectionists who broke into our Capitol. Did you see this?
No, I did not see it.
Yeah, evidently they're talking about, I guess, breaking it into segments of, who was just kind of just somebody walking around in the Capitol, who was kind of a leader, who was someone doing some other things. So they're going to try and break it up into, potentially, like the 300 cases they're talking about could be people who just get a slap on the wrist or diversion programs or stuff like this. And I'm going, no. People need jail time for this.
Correct. I mean, if somebody was outside and didn't go in the Capitol and they were there and didn't do, just give you an example. Let's say somebody was not in the Capitol but was within the crowd, didn't do anything, didn't hit anybody, but the fact that they were on the property, you could say you could do a plea deal. In particular, if they were hitting employees of the Capitol Hill Police, and were in the building, I don't understand how you get a slap on the wrist for that.
I don't either. I think if you were in the building, I don't care what it is, you go to jail. Now, we can talk about how long, but there's got to be some time looking from the other side of the bars. You've got to know that what you did was wrong.
Well, yes, and in particular, now that we have surpassed trillion-dollar pieces of legislation, which we've done, okay? Now that we've done that, I mean, one would think, look, if it costs $25 million for the government lawyers, it's not going to fully go over every single case, so what? This was such a big deal. It really sort of doesn't matter at this point in time, what the government has to spend with lawyers to go over every case.
Yep. No, I'm right there. I want people going to jail. Now, I guess some of the argument is, well, once we start pleading this stuff out, we can get testimony from people, and we can go after the really big people. So what I think they're hoping is that all of these MAGA folks are going to all be rats, and they're going to rat out the person ahead of them because they're all trying to save themselves because none of them are going to want to go to jail. And I think that's part of, because that's how this, how this stuff always works. They always want somebody bigger to fry.
Right.
But I don't know that that's justice, and I don't know as a country that we can allow that to happen.
Well, in cases, and they do it all the time. I was involved in a high-profile case. You had all kinds of people that did all kinds of things, but it will narrow down out of 20 or so people. Then it narrows down to 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And this is a different case. This insurrection. Each person in there within the building was equally culpable. Now, if they have somebody directly, they have a video of them beating somebody on the head or something. Okay, that goes to a different level above that. But all the rest of them are still culpable as insurrectionists, as seditionists.
Yep.
In there with the intent to stop the process of the government and to riot and destroy and potentially kill.
No, I think we locked it. They've got to serve time. There's no slap on the wrist.
Well, and I mentioned the money, Rick, because in the article today, it's cited the Justice Department is saying that they have an overwhelming workload for the prosecutor and the FBI agents.
Right.
And what I would say to that is, okay, if you need to spend $10 million more dollars, $15 million more dollars, so what? To hire additional lawyers, from the private sector to help the government, so what? If you have to.
I'm right there with you. So what? I wanted to get your thoughts also on today's tragedy. It seems like we're getting back to normal. Another white guy with a gun shooting something up.
Or in Boulder.
Yep.
It was just terrible. There's a lot of details they don't know yet, on it. But of course, multiple dead people, 10 people killed at the King Soper's store. Just absolutely terrible.
And I again, we don't know, and I wish we did know more. But it just seems like it's spring, and I guess we're looking to the other side of the virus, of which now folks at the CDC are saying, hold on just a little bit longer. Let's not have an avoidable surge, because I guess these new variants are causing trouble. Any thoughts?
Well, I mean, we're close, and we have 100 million people vaccinated. We're now leading the world in vaccinations, and there's talk about what they're calling vaccine diplomacy, where we help other countries that aren't up to speed. But we ourselves are doing quite better. And again, it's not ultra close to being finished, but we are definitely, no question about it, statistically, et cetera, rounding a corner. So if everybody can just hang on. We don't need to have a debate that we need to, have 2 masks on till 2022. We don't need that type of thing. Let's just focus right now on spacing and masks and just hang on till, we can get to that 75 or 80% of people inoculated, and it should go better.
No, just hang on. Don't do anything stupid. No more Boise, Idaho mask burnings that leads to a super spreader event. No more of that, and leads to their legislature being shut down. Just a little bit of common sense.
Right, and Miami.
Yeah, it's just nuts. And finally, wanted to get some of your thoughts on. Evidently, there's some talk of a $3 trillion Build Back Better plan. I guess they're looking at 2 waves, one on actually building physical infrastructure of roads and bridges and 5G and all of that stuff that we certainly need. And then another one to look into, pre-K and child care and health care and a lot of that, family kind of stuff. But a $3 trillion price tag, tentatively. Any thoughts?
I think it's great. This was something that Donald Trump, when he became president, the first week should have done. It would have set an entirely different tone. It would have, actually made people a bit happy. But there's a pair of proposals, and we would then invest in, the infrastructure, the education, workforce development, in a wide, variety of items. Now, there has been a meeting already with the chair and the ranking member in the House, and that came out quite well. You know, the statements out of the meeting. Now they're talking also about the sinful word called earmarks. Well, these are earmarks. Yes, they are.
Yep.
And these are earmarks where you've got people in, whatever part of Pennsylvania, Ohio, California, wherever the local communities are talking about what they need for improvements. It goes to their member. Their member then, lobbies through the committee to get money for projects.
Yep.
I can name them. Now, because there was a bridge to nowhere, now that's what you're seeing now, bridge to nowhere. My name was mentioned on earmarks. I didn't do earmarks. I don't know how I got in that one, but I didn't do any earmarks. But they're using Duke Cunningham and some earmarks. So some things have happened in the past, but you can't let the baby be thrown out with the bathwater. Make it transparent. Let everybody know who earmarked, why they earmarked, where it came from. That's fine. But these earmarks are the people's way through their representatives to have their money returned for jobs and progress and the workforce in their communities. And so I think this is a great thing. I don't think they can build enough. I think it's going to help not just on the short-term jobs, but the long-term benefits for communities and people. I was on transportation. That's why I'm so high on this entire idea.
No, I'm very much pro pro earmarks. I think you need to most certainly invest in your infrastructure and get things going.
Right.
Now, the bridge to nowhere. Where was that? Do you remember?
Yes. Oh, yes. I remember quite clearly because I had constituents who called me and said, "We want you to vote against the transportation bill because the chairman, Don Young of Alaska, has built a bridge that only benefits X amount of people."
Right.
Now, it was actually, I think, never actually built. And I said, "No, I'm not going to vote against that." And they said, "How dare you?" And I said, "There's $68 million, sitting in the district for major development, and, we'll let the chairman sort out him living with the bridge to nowhere and whether it's actually built."
See, but my mindset was it's a bridge to nowhere now, but eventually it leads to somewhere.
Somewhere.
That's how you get there. That's the only way. That's the only way you can get to somewhere is if you have a bridge to it.
Well, like I said, a couple of people said just vote against that entire bill because of that bridge to nowhere. I said, well, the bridge to nowhere will probably never be built. I don't think it ever was.
No, I don't think so either.
No.
But it was one of those things where you go, okay, it's going nowhere, but eventually that's how you get to somewhere. It is kind of how we built, the whole country. You had that railroad thing go through.
Right. And the highway interstate under Eisenhower, the interstate highway system, and all the wonderful things that happened off of that.
Yep. No, we need the investment, and
these are good bills. These are beautiful things. This is a time for Mayor Pete. I still call him Mayor Pete Buttigieg to shine and to see what all that they can do for many people. This will be very, very, for the most part, bipartisan.
I sure hope so. I sure hope so because we need it. But Bob, I appreciate the time as always. Good stuff, my friend.
Thank you, Rick.
No, I'm serious. At the end of the day, we need these kind of investments. And like Bob said, I can't believe he didn't do earmarks. As a congressman, I would be all for it. Look, I got to bring something home. I gotta have something that says, look what I'm doing. You need the ribbon cuttings. You need the hey, look what we look. I know. There's too much other stuff. But you think about it, we haven't really invested in our infrastructure in years. And this is an opportunity to right a lot of that stuff. And it's a thing I'm giving Biden credit for, man. He's thinking big. I mean, these are not small proposals. And that's one of my knocks. To be honest, the reason he was fourth on my list during the primary is I thought he was going to be like an Obama 2.0. And we were gonna go all small ball. He's bringing the A game, I think, in this stuff. Now, what I would love to see the PRO Act be added to the infrastructure part of it because I think it's an economic issue. I think making sure that workers have the ability to earn a decent wage, but while rebuilding our country is hugely important. But if it's going to be anything that you're going to get Republicans onto, Republicans are never, let me repeat, never going to side with workers' ability to organize. Not this Republican Party. Maybe one in the future. Maybe if Republicans take their party back somewhere near the sane line, that can happen. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.